Hello, my dears. I'm so happy to see you in class today. You've come to Menopause Taylor University, and I'm Menopause Taylor. Since this is really a school, I always orient you to the lesson of the day. We do everything in order here, just like in real school. So here's where we are. We've just started the videos on the symptoms of estrogen deficiency. Now, this is in contrast to the years of videos that have addressed the 3 fatal diseases of estrogen deficiency. And last week, in the first video on symptoms, I explained why you should focus more on your dry menopausal genitalia than on your hot menopausal body. And you learned that compared to hot flashes, the genital symptoms of estrogen deficiency are a much greater problem. Yet, people talk about hot flashes and ignore dry genitalia. Well, at least they try to ignore dry genitalia. Any woman who has dry genitalia will tell you that she cannot ignore them. They make you miserable in a wide variety of ways. There's an awful big, long list of miserable genital symptoms. Well, this mistake of focusing on your hot menopausal body rather than on your dry menopausal genitalia became such an oversight that the menopause societies decided to give the whole collection of dry menopausal genitalia symptoms a name of their own. In 2014, the name they chose was GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause. The acronym is GSM. So today I'm going to tell you all about GSM. Now, in my book, this material is in chapters 22, 23, and 25. But you get the best menopause education by watching these videos and referring to my book. I've created them both specifically to give you the best menopause education ever. Okay, I guess the only logical place to start is with the very name of the syndrome itself. GenitoUrinary Syndrome. Now, obviously, genito means genitalia, and urinary means urinary system or urinary tract. So the name GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause seeks to include all your symptoms down there. The goal of the menopause societies wanting to coin a new name for your genital symptoms of menopause was to adopt a name that included all your symptoms down there. The problem is that the name GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause is too vague. It's just not specific enough for non-medical individuals. So I will present all the different genital symptoms that contribute to GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause. And you'll see why the name GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause falls a bit short. I think the best way to organize this information is to address it in 3 different ways. First, I will delineate the anatomical aspects of GSM in terms of the organs it affects. Second, I'll delineate the subjective symptoms you feel from GSM. And third, I'll address the objective physical signs and changes your doctor sees on your pelvic exam with GSM. And that way you'll see just how much GSM entails and how much it fails. And in keeping with my chart fetish, we'll make a chart as we go along. Okay, we'll start with the first focus, which is the organs that are affected by GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause. Well, its very name reveals some of them, but it does so vaguely. GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause affects 5 organ systems: your vagina, your vulva, your urinary tract, your clitoris, and your sex drive. But each of these has multiple consequences that are due to genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So the word genito refers to your genitalia. Your genitalia include your vagina, your vulva, and your clitoris. The word urinary refers to your urinary tract. Your urinary tract structures include your bladder and your urethra. But of the 5 organ systems affected by genitourinary syndrome of menopause, the name genitourinary syndrome designates only 4 of them. There's no reference to your sex drive in the name genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So I'll go through and depict how each of these organ systems suffers by presenting our second and third foci of subjective symptoms and your doctor's objective exam findings. And here's how we'll begin our chart. The chart is very simple for now. In the first column, I've listed our 5 anatomical organ systems that change due to GSM. The second column will be where we delineate the actual effects of GSM on each of these organ systems. The third column will be where we designate the subjective symptoms that you experience from each. And the fourth column is where we will indicate the objective findings that your doctor sees on your pelvic exam. So this chart will not stay simple. Well, let's move on to the actual effects of genitourinary syndrome of menopause. At the same time, we can fill in the cells for the subjective symptoms and objective findings for each of them. So, starting with your vagina. Now, unfortunately, your vagina gets hit the hardest. Your vagina changes in a multitude of ways. First, it gets dry. You experience this as a subjective sensation of loss of lubrication, itching, burning, pressure, or discomfort with or without intercourse. Your doctor sees this as a vaginal color change from pink to white and less vaginal discharge. Second, the pH balance of your vagina increases. It becomes more basic. You experience this as a tendency to get more vaginal infections. And your doctor diagnoses more vaginal infections. Third, the walls of your vagina get very thin. You notice this as pain during intercourse or insertion of a sex toy. Your doctor notices this as sensitivity or bleeding on pelvic exam. Fourth, the wrinkles in your vagina disappear. You notice this as shrinkage of your vagina and pain with intercourse or insertion of a sex toy. Your doctor notices this as actual vaginal shrinkage and an absence of the wrinkles on pelvic exam. You know, before the new name of genitourinary syndrome of menopause was coined in 2014, all of these anatomical vaginal changes were called vaginal atrophy. But now they're all just a part of genitourinary syndrome of menopause. You know, it's interesting to learn why things change. And the reason for changing the name from vaginal atrophy to genitourinary syndrome of menopause is odd. The word atrophy means aging, shrinking, or wasting away. Well, that's precisely what happens to your vagina when you lose your estradiol at menopause. So there was nothing inaccurate about the name in the first place. But the people who thought a name change was in order decided that the word atrophy was demeaning. Demeaning. The word demeaning means disrespectful. What in the world does vaginal atrophy have to do with respect? Apparently, the name changers thought that the true term vaginal atrophy made women feel disrespected. Well, I'll tell you what's more disrespectful than the term vaginal atrophy. Ignoring the fact that women have vaginal atrophy. Changing the name to something that camouflages what's really happening to your vagina. And refusing to prevent it. That's disrespectful. The name is irrelevant. The attention given to it is what matters. Okay, so that's it for my rant on that. I will use the term vaginal atrophy when I'm referring specifically to your vaginal symptoms of menopause. I will use the term GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause when I am referring to all of your genital symptoms of menopause. That way, we'll distinguish between the two. You know what a stickler I am for specificity in all things. And I think the new term merges too many things together and sets the stage for confusion. By distinguishing between the two, you will learn what you need to know in order to succeed at managing all of your genital symptoms of menopause. So we can now add all of this vaginal stuff to our chart. So now you see that I've inserted all those vaginal changes in the cells for your vaginal GSM symptoms. See what I mean? There are many. And that's just for one of the 5 affected organ systems. Now for your vulva. Now this is one of the anatomical organ systems that the name GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause fails to acknowledge by name. It's implied with the word genital. But you know, I don't think most women think of their vulva when they hear the name GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause. So you need to know that it affects your vulva too. First, your vagina isn't the only thing that gets dry. Your vulva does too. And when your vulva gets dry, you may notice vulvar itching and rashes. Your doctor may diagnose a vulvar skin disease. Second, the opening to your vagina, which are called labia, shrink. So you notice that the fat pads around your genital region disappear, making your vulva more sensitive. Your doctor notices atrophy of your labia on exam. Third, your vulva houses all the muscles of your pelvis. They are the very muscles that contract in response to sexual stimulation. Well, if sex hurts, those vulvar pelvic muscles may contract before you even attempt sexual activity, and that can set the stage for painful sex. Your doctor may notice that your vulvar muscles contract excessively on pelvic exam. So even though GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause fails to acknowledge these vulvar effects, we will not. Let's put them on our chart. Next, we have the effect of GenitoUrinary Syndrome on your urinary tract. And while there aren't as many urinary effects as there are vaginal effects, there are still enough to really disrupt your life. First, you get urinary tract infections or UTIs. And this is because of the pH change in your vagina. That change in your vagina affects everything in the area. And your urethra is in your vaginal area. You experience this as burning with urination, blood in your urine, and bladder pain. Your doctor discovers bacteria in your urine culture. Second, you have stress urinary incontinence. This is where you leak urine when you don't want to. And it's because without estrogen, your bladder and urethra cannot function normally. So you experience leakage of urine when you cough, sneeze, laugh, lift, or exercise. On pelvic exam, your doctor confirms lax pelvic muscles and a change in the angle of your urethra. Third, you have urge urinary incontinence. This is where you leak urine with no warning, or you have sudden urges to urinate with inadequate time to reach the toilet. So you experience embarrassing moments of urinary leakage. Your doctor discovers that your bladder muscles contract spontaneously. So your urinary tract contributes a significant number of issues to GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause. Let's add this to our chart. So now I've divided the urinary tract into these three separate effects of GSM and listed the subjective symptoms and objective findings of each. But your most important organ for sexual pleasure is your clitoris. This little tiny white thing that I'm putting right up here that just fell. And your clitoris can be affected too. First, your clitoris shrinks. You may actually see that it's smaller than it used to be. Your doctor will diagnose it as a postmenopausal clitoris. Second, the hood of your clitoris can fuse to the actual clitoris. You may notice this as pain with or without stimulation of your clitoris. Your doctor will diagnose scar tissue restricting movement of your clitoral hood. Third, your clitoris may not respond to stimulation. In other words, you may find it difficult to have an orgasm. Of course, your doctor won't be able to make an objective diagnosis about your ability to have an orgasm. So we'll just go ahead and add this to our chart now. So now I've just added all these horrific clitoral changes to our chart. Well, obviously, all of this is going to add up to the overall effects of GSM on your sex drive. Just think about what we've already discussed. I mean, the effects on your vagina alone are enough to really interfere with your sex drive. First, your vaginal dryness makes it such that anything touching your vagina hurts. You'll notice this as pain during penetration. Your doctor will notice that you have pain on insertion of a speculum. Second, the thin walls make it such that your vagina tears easily. You'll notice sharp pain and bleeding if you tear. Your doctor will diagnose a laceration in your vagina. And third, the disappearance of the wrinkles make your vagina too small to accommodate a penis or a sex toy. You'll notice an inability to insert a penis or a sex toy. And your doctor will have to use the teeny tiny little pediatric speculum in order to do your pelvic exam. So basically, sex hurts. Well, if sex is painful, it's going to make you want to avoid sex altogether. So that dictates your very interest in sex. And if you associate sex with pain, all those muscles in your vulva will remain tight merely in anticipation of any kind of sexual activity. Plus, if your clitoris doesn't respond to stimulation, it's difficult for you to have any interest in sex. So there goes your sex drive. And your lack of sex drive affects your relationship with your significant other. And if your vagina, vulva, and clitoris do not do enough to interfere with your sex drive alone, your urinary tract may. You may leak urine while having sex or while having an orgasm. And for some women, that's embarrassing. So now you see the full chart, all completed. I've filled in all the rows, including the one for sex drive. My, how this chart has enlarged, unlike your GSM-affected vagina. So the effect of GSM on your sex drive is really a result of all the combined effects on your vagina, vulva, urinary tract, and clitoris. For some women, the overall effect on their sex drive is what drives them to find out about GSM in the first place. If you think about it, you realize that GSM represents total atrophy of all your genitalia. That's why there's so much more to it. And that's why it's so much more significant than just your hot flashes. It causes true anatomical deformities. And another thing that is significant about GSM is the timing. Most women notice progressive changes over time. Perimenopause is notorious for the subjective symptoms that you'll notice yourself. Postmenopause is notorious for the objective findings that your doctor will notice on exam. And by about 2 years after postmenopause, most women will tell you that their entire love life is in the loo at just 52. So this whole GenitoUrinary Syndrome of Menopause is a big, big deal. Do not downplay it. Don't worry, I will go into much greater detail on all the things I've mentioned here today. The whole purpose of this video was to set you up for the ones that follow. The chart is your summary, and you know you can find it in the description box or at menopausetailor.me. If you have any of the symptoms of genitourinary syndrome of menopause that we discussed today, definitely schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me. All of these things require tailoring. Do not try to take care of them on your own. Do not go to some doctor who knows nothing about menopause, and remember that most doctors know nothing about menopause. Schedule a consultation with me. I will make sure you get the help you deserve. Also, subscribe to both my newsletter and this channel, and I hope to see you on social media too. Next week, we'll distinguish your reproductive organs from your sexual organs. That's right, they are not one and the same. See you then. Bye.